For the keynote to kind of lock this off here, I want to start talking about what it's going to take in the future to re-experience SharePoint. And I think a lot of the problems that we have in SharePoint is because of the interface design itself. The functionality of SharePoint works. We've proven that over the years. But what can we do to make it better? So what I want to do is I want to talk about how to re-experience SharePoint through interface enhancement that even site managers can do. Or else the other way I like to do this is I like to say, let's save the planet from the aliens who brought you the default SharePoint interface. As I started thinking about this, I was thinking, who would have created this to look like this? So we're going to get into that a little bit. My name outside of my SharePoint circles is obviously Optimus Share Prime, and I hope that translates over to a little joke from Transformers. But what I've done is I've tried to lighten the load and the mood in this presentation by putting it together with nothing but SharePoint. I've got end-user SharePoint, and Alpesh also kindly mentioned that I now have a new company that started last week called Nothing But Branding. So we'll look at that. Here's some of the places that I've gone, and I see a very, very big area down there called Africa that doesn't have any red dots on that, but I'm going to do something about that in 5 weeks. We're actually doing a Sharing the Point tour, going down to Africa, starting in Cape Horn, going up to Johannesburg and 3 or 4 other locations, and we're going to top it off by climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. And we're going to actually take some iPads up there and prove that Caligo can actually do connectivity from the top of the world, from the top of Africa. Alpesh, does that sound exciting? I hope it does.
It does sound exciting, and what I can see over here, besides South Africa, India is missing the game as well. So we must do something about India as well, honestly.
I think we shall. I know that Michael, Noel, and Joel Olison have been over there to see you guys, but we want to do a Sharing the Point there too. We're gonna make that part of our tour.
Fantastic.
With Nothing But Branding, this is actually what you're looking at here, Alpesh. This is what I would consider a very exciting interface. This is actually SharePoint 2010, by the way. And what we've done is we've created a method that can actually do this to your default SharePoint 2010 sites in 60 seconds. We can actually make it look like this.
Wow.
So,
fantastic.
Yeah, thanks. I'm going to walk through what we did, and I'm going to actually show you the code snippets on how we can do this so people that understand CSS can do it on their own. Or else we're also at Nothing But Branding, we're giving away some free templates too. This right here is the way I think people perceive SharePoint when they first see it. Do you recognize that shot, Alpesh?
Yeah, I do.
I really do. When people come in from the real world, you know, they've been using Facebook all day, they're using TweetDeck, they're using Twitter, they're using their SAP applications, things that work, that are relatively intuitive. And then we dump them into this thing called SharePoint. I think this is the way a lot of people feel. It's like there's a challenge here. So what we're going to do about it is let's run through the agenda and see if we can help you with that. First of all, if you are tweeting, and I hope you are, the hashtag today is SPS India. And you're more than welcome even right now to say that you are in the session so that people can know that we're doing this now and that we're now live. SPS India. And if you'd like to follow me, mine is EUSP for End User SharePoint. So that's the way we can keep the word spreading here. What I want to do in the next half hour is look at the default SharePoint interface and what we're having to deal with. Then we're going to examine some basic CSS classes and the resources that can help you with those CSS classes if you're starting from scratch. And then we'll talk about what does a re-experience of SharePoint really, really look like. If you can change the colors, if you can change the positioning and the location, what can you actually do as a site manager for your site? That's where we're headed. Alpesh, how does that sound for a half hour? Sound good? And you're muted if you're talking to me here?
Yes, it sounds good. It sounds perfect. Looking forward to it. Very exciting.
Okay, good. Thank you. Got to make sure you're still awake, right? Or I'm the one that's got to stay awake.
I am. Thank you.
All right. So let's look at an overview here. This is a CSS refresher, cascading style sheets refresher for people that are thinking about going into branding. So here's the default SharePoint interface when you first open it up from the box. And from there, I broke it down. There's three areas that we want to deal with. We want to deal with the header, the quick launch, and then the content area. And the enhanced interface, if you look at this closely, Alpesh, there's really nothing major we've done here except change the color and put our own logo in there. And it really does enhance the user interface, I think.
It sure does, definitely.
Yeah, that's just a simple color enhancement. So think about how easy it is to change people's perception of the interface just by changing the color. So let's look at the CSS for beginners. This is just a real quick review. I'll run over it to make sure everybody's on the same page here. Now, the basic CSS changes. What can we do with CSS changes? First of all, we can change the font. This is something that's very, very basic that can make a huge difference. With Nothing But Branding today, I was dealing with Audrey because we're changing our site a bit. And one of the things that we decided to do is we're going to change to a Verdana font because it's going to be a little bit different than the basic Arial that everybody is using. It's still straight line, no serif, but it gives it a much cleaner feel. So when you're thinking about your fonts for your SharePoint site, you can go in and change the fonts for the default fonts. The caveat there, though, is to make sure that you're using generic enough fonts that everyone will have them on their computer. We have a special font that we use called Avant-Garde when we're making images and want text on images. And we would love to do that for our site, but very, very few people have the Avant-Garde the Avant-Garde font on their computer, so they wouldn't be able to view it properly. So select a nice font, but make sure that your users have that on their computer. Then we can actually deal with the borders. Everything on the page has borders around it. And those borders can have margins, they can have cell padding, they can have thickness of borders, so that we can actually change the feel of the page. I'm looking at this and I exaggerated it horribly with all these red lines, but just to show you the different areas in which you could actually manage the borders on the page if you felt like it. And the final thing we'll take a look at for the beginning designers is the fill attribute. When you fill a background, you can choose the color, you can choose what you want to do as far as laying out the color palette on the page behind the content. So once we've decided the fonts, and we've decided the borders, and we've decided the fill, how do we actually get at that back-end page? How do we know what to change in order to make these things happen? There's a couple resources that you might consider, and if you're taking notes, this is the first one. Most of the major browsers have developer tools installed with them now. I personally like to use Firebug that goes with the Firefox. And what happens is, you see the screen right there? Take a close look, and you'll see that the bottom half of the screen is filled up with code. That's actually when I mouse over or click in an area on the page, the Firebug interface will show me the elements, the attributes, and the HTML that are affected by the area where I am, that are affecting the area where I am. Now, the fun part about these developer tools is in that right-hand panel over there. You can actually change on the fly the attributes values in your site, and they will actually show up in your browser. Now, it's only do it in your browser temporarily in cache so that you can see what changes would look like. But it's a really, really nice way to go in, dig a little deeper in your site, and find out where the CSS is located and what classes you're going to have to work with in order to make the changes that you want. The second thing that we've got here is by Heather Solomon. Most of you know Heather as the Queen of Theme. She has, in 2007 version, she actually laid out an entire chart that showed the CSS classes for all of the CSS in SharePoint 2007. And she has done the same thing for 2010. That came out a couple months ago, so that you can actually go to this. Go to Google or Bing and type in Heather Solomon CSS chart. and it will pop up right there. It'll come right to the top on the first page. And what she does is she made it so that if you know what classes you want to change, you can go directly into this chart, find the class, she'll show you the code, and actually the code expands and contracts so that you've got a little code snippets that you can work with to see what you have to manage for the CSS. Really, really nice piece of work. Also, Heather and Dustin Miller are going to start writing for Nothing But Branding next week. So Heather's going to be doing this kind of stuff for us on the site, so I hope you'll follow what she's doing. It's pretty phenomenal stuff. The other reference that you might consider using on end-user SharePoint, Benjamin Nyland has written a series for very, very beginning branders of SharePoint. And this is a step-by-step process. He's got a series of 25 or 30 articles that would take you from absolutely zero up through the basics of managing the look and feel of your site with CSS. So you might want to check that one out. So 3 references then. Most of the major browsers have developer tools so that you can see what you're dealing with immediately while you're on the page. The second thing is Heather Solomon's CSS chart, and the third is going to end-user SharePoint and finding Benjamin Nyland's articles on dealing with CSS. So what does CSS look like once you finally get into it? It really looks a lot like HTML, doesn't it? But what it does is it allows you not to control the content, it controls the look and feel of the content. And that's what we're going to be looking at for the next 20 minutes or so. Here's what the default interface would look like for the body tag, a little bit of the body tag here. We can see that we've got a Verdana font, Arial, and sans serif. So the font family is defined for us. The font size is 8 points. And by the way, that's why I usually can't read it because it's too small for me. That's one of the first things I'll do is I'll up the font size on the pages, on the content, so we can read it. And then there's the color. We can actually choose a color for it. That 676767 is a medium dark gray for your font color. So you've got your default interface there. And now for the borders, we look at it and say, okay, we've got a 1 pixel border solid. What we're looking at here is if you look up at the top there, it's the left-hand panel content. And it's got borders around all of it. When you look at it, the top border is 0, so it's turned it off. The right border is 1, and the bottom border is 1 with none on the left. So that should tell us that we're going to be able to control not just the entire border around it as one single entity, but actually as a top, right, bottom, and left to control what those borders look like. And then we'll look at the default interface here and look at the background color. There's your fill, right? The background color is FC, 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 and again, that's a pretty light colored gray on the background. So that's what CSS looks like. We've looked at a small set of tools that can get you started. We've given you a visual representation of what CSS looks like. Now I want to take a deeper dive into the SharePoint interface itself. Alpesh, I want to take a breath here. Let me know, please, how is this coming through? Is the voice quality okay? Are the slides coming through? Are we doing okay here?
We're doing fantastic, Mark. Thank you so much. Yes, it is coming through across very nicely. The sound as well as the slides, and of course the content is amazing.
Oh, thank you. I don't think I've got to amazing yet, but I'm going to get there, I hope.
So yeah, that whatever it is, it's been a trailer, so I guess we'll now see the full picture.
So let's look at the header here. What does it look like to have the header? The overview here is a header is going to have a site actions, it's going to have a site title, and it's going to have the global nav. And when we look at this, here's the default SharePoint interface, and here's the area that we want to enhance by using the things that we just talked about: fonts, borders, and colors. We want to change it to black. All we changed there, I'm going to flip back so you can see it. There's the basic header. Look at that simple thing that changes the entire look and feel of the page here. I think it's pretty amazing that we can very, very quickly and easily change the colors to give the user a completely new experience on the site. So let's look at the site actions. what does the default CSS look like that is defining what your site actions look like at the top of the page? The entire page font is inherited from the body. So we're looking here at the default body tag about 3 minutes ago. Well, the site actions inherits that. So it's still 8-point, it's still the same color, so it's relatively bland. When we look at the borders around it, we're saying that there is, I'm not seeing any borders, so what I did is that red thing that you see at the bottom there with the slash and the star, that is actually a comment. So if you wanted to put a red border around it, you could. It's just a way so that you could experiment with the border there. And the final thing we'll look at is the fill. The fill is the background color on these things so that we can choose what color is running behind the site actions. Now, I don't expect anybody to memorize what we're looking at here. That's not the purpose of the session. The purpose of the session is to give you a taste of what it looks like when you dive into the face and you see the kinds of things that you have to change. If you really want to do the changes, then you get your developer tools, you get Heather's chart, and you read Benjamin's articles, and you start doing this by hand from scratch. So what happens if we want to update that site actions area? We want to enhance the CSS here. The first thing that we're going to do is up that font size. I got that font size really pumped up so that we can see things now in this interface. The next thing we want to look at is the borders. Do we want to lay a border around this? And in this case, we pulled in a white border. That's what that solid FFFFF is, so we can see that. And then we're looking at the background. In this case, it says the background is equal to none, but if you look at the diagram there, if you wanted to look at it, you see the Site Actions button. There's the Site Actions. It's MS, Site Actions, menu hover. What that's going to do is, as we hover over the Site Actions button, that's going to turn it white so that we can actually see that we're hovering over something here. Let's look at the title area. If we look at the header up at the title, we're going to look and see the default font here and the background colors. And I'm looking now at the font hasn't been changed, but we can look at the borders. So right now for the default borders, there's 1 pixel at the top, which is a medium gray. And you look at the bottom here, and there's a little bit color. I can't tell from looking at B8 what it is, but I think it's still going to be very close to gray or a little bit, very, very shaded blue when we look at that. And we look at the fill area, and we look and say, oh, there is an image that we're going to pull in on the fill so that we can actually color the background with the fill that way. So that should give you another point for your notes, is that not only can you manage the fill with color, you can actually fill it with an image. Let's go to the title area and see how we would enhance this. Once again, I'll look, and I pulled out some of the breadcrumbs so we can see different stuff here. And you've got font sizes up 25 pixels so that we can actually see it a lot easier. We look at the borders and see if we can enhance it. Once again, nothing is there, so I put some markers in there so that you can have some kind of resource and say, okay, the border on top is going to be solid and the border on the bottom is going to be solid so that you can see that. All right? And the next one is the enhanced fill, and we've got an image that we can pull in from the fill. So we've got the site actions, we've got the title. Let's go to the global navigation and see what's going on with the global navigation. Lot going on here. You can see here that there's one called Light 1 and Light 2. That kind of sticks out right there. What happened in 2010 is you have the ability to change themes quickly in the Site Manager control panel and the Site Collection Manager control panel, so that when you change some of the colors on these themes, like I think Obelisk is one of the ones that's used the most, they would actually go in and find this comment and actually change these backgrounds based upon these comments. So this is how the default font is working here. The next thing we'll do is look at the borders. And once again, it looks like we've got the same thing that we had before under the title that way. So I'm going to go in here, and I'm looking at the default fill. And once again, the color theme is going to take care of that fill like that. So what would the global enhanced look like? first of all, we're going to control this a little bit better. I'm going to put a light gray in the background. I'm going to do the font family of Verdana. I'm going to have the font size, the medium-sized font, and then I'm going to set the padding, the margin, and the height, and then the text decoration. Text decoration is what makes it so that when you are using links and you're mousing over links and you're getting set up, you don't have underlines of it. We don't want any kind of decorations on the text on it. On the borders, we're looking at the top. The margin at the top says, I need you to push the content above me away 20 pixels high, and at the bottom 20 pixels too, so that we've got some kind of buffer between the content above and below us on here on the navigation bar. It makes it a little bit cleaner. And then we're going to pull the background global nav.ping image and use that, and we're not going to have a border there on the top and bottom. And we're going to look at the enhanced fill and say, let's use our own image so that it will go into the global container. So let's re-experience the header alone. In this case, we're going to say, look at this page. And all we've done is done the enhancement, the types of enhancements that we talked about in the previous 10 minutes. So you can see that that black is really nice there. It's the gray and it's shaded different, and it gives a lot more room and it's a clearer vision of what's going on. If you notice underneath it, I left everything in the content areas and the quick launch bar. I left default. So you can see even just adjusting the header, the site actions, the title, and the global nav, it makes a huge difference on this page. You can change it to a burgundy wine color if that's the colors of your company. You can change it to a smooth slate, an Indian turquoise even, so that a lot of people like the turquoise and they like this deep ocean aqua. That's what we're getting most responses on, is the aqua. So think about it. Something as simple as changing the colors and the font sizes within your header make an enormous difference in how people will perceive your site. There you go. So that's the first touch there. We went through the header. Alpesh, I'm coming back to you to say, I hope that came through okay.
Yes, indeed, it came through fine, as very smooth, definitely.
Okay, good. I'm hearing people, more and more people come into the session. I think I'm hearing a lot of pings, so I hope that's good news.
Yeah, it is. It's definitely going up, so I'm definitely happy on that as well.
Okay. Let me do a quick intro then to make sure that people know where we are. That's Alpesh talking on the other end, Mark Miller here in Oakland, California this week. And what we're talking about here is how to re-experience SharePoint. What simple things can we do in SharePoint using CSS that will make an enormous difference in the user experience? Alpesh, anything for you to say at this point?
No, I think, yeah, it's definitely, as I said, amazing. Even when you thought it wasn't amazing to start with, but yeah, small things, small changes in CSS definitely can make a lot of difference there, and we're definitely seeing that throughout your session. So thank you again, and yep, looking forward to more of it.
All right, good. So let's look at the quick launch bar. We did the header. Let's go to the quick launch bar and see what kind of thing we can do that. The quick launch bar, the default CSS is list style. This is a thing that most people that are beginning branding don't realize, but the quick launch bar is nothing more than a glorified list. And that list is punked up a little bit with CSS. And you can quote me on that. The quick launch bar is punked up with CSS. So what we've got here is there's the default font, and then we've got the margins. Look at that. There's 4 separate margins in there. When you're looking at that, it starts with the top, goes to the right, and that 20 pixels says push this down 20 pixels from this point, and the 0 pixels on the far end are for the left. There's no padding involved there, and there is no fill in the default. So if we go to the enhanced version, what we're going to do is look and say, okay, everything so far is going to be inherited from the body. So we're going to take the body font. And from there, we're going to take borders, and we're going to remove any borders that by default SharePoint has put on the quick launch. And then from there, we're going to make the background color transparent. Now, what about the main links now in the CSS for the quick launch? It inherits from the body. This is what we're talking about when we set all that up in the body, in that body tag. It's going to be inherited all down through the rest of the page. The default does change the border now. It's a 1 pixel transparent around it with a little bit of padding. And then there is no fill in the default quick launch bar. So let's enhance it a little bit. We're going to change the color to solid black. I'm going to change the links to solid black, and I'm going to change it to a 14-point font instead of that 8 point, so they're actually more visible. And I'm going to change it to a Verdana, which is a little bit cleaner style than the Arial that's there by default. For the borders, we're looking at a 1 pixel solid border all the way around, and that is black. And then the padding bottom is 5 pixels. And we have no fill behind. So we have one more set of sublinks to look at. That was the main links. The sublinks are for the default going to inherit from the body. And then we're going to see that they've got a solid white. That 1 pixel solid white is the border on the bottom. And there is no fill. If we are going to enhance that, what we're going to do is look at the menu vertical routes, follow it out. The list static, 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 and then it's an A. So the anchor tag, the one that makes it a link, we're going to keep it black. We're going to make it 14 pixels Verdana and no text decoration. I'm looking at down at the very, very bottom. If we see that there are no more borders at all, it's a 0 solid transparent border. And then we're looking at the background, which is equal to none. What happens if we change that? We do those quick changes to quick launch. Look closely now as we do this. On the left-hand side is the only thing that's changed. Notice the mouse over has changed, right? When you mouse over, there's gray now behind the item to make it very, very easy to know what item you're mousing over. Notice we haven't touched the header as we did in the previous set. So what we're doing here is a lot more subtle. But when you put that together with the changes that you have in the header, you'll see it makes a huge difference. Here's what burgundy wine would look like if you just changed the quick launch. There's your slate. And there's your Indian turquoise. And the final one would be your deep ocean aqua. So changing the quick launch isn't going to make a big difference visually when people initially hit the page. But when they use the quick launch, you can actually make it more functional by making changes as people are mousing over the areas in there so they know where they are with their mouse. So it's much, much easier to see. So that, changing the header, then changing the quick launch, leaves us with the final thing, which would be the content area. Now, the content area is kind of tricky. Because when we look at the default content area here in the default CSS, there's nothing big here. It's all going to inherit from the body tag. And the reason for that is the content area itself doesn't do anything. It holds the content. And the content itself is held within web parts. So you really have to manage the look and feel of the web parts in order to manage the look and feel of your content area. So as we go through this, I'm just going to say that even with the enhanced areas here, even when we're doing enhanced, what we have here is basically just using the default. Because there isn't really anything that you want to do with the content area. You want to do it with the web parts. So let's look at the difference in the content area. Again, if you look at the header and you look at the left-hand side quick launch, those have not been changed. Those are default now. But what we've done is made changes and said, okay, when you put a web part in the content area, we want that header to match the colors of our main theme. And you can see that it really makes a huge difference, doesn't it? Where the quick launch bar was more subtle. If you change the color of the web part to the web part default colors, it really does make a huge perception change here for what you're trying to do. I love these changes here because it's relatively easy to do if you know what you're doing, and it makes such a difference in your user experience. You'll find you get a lot more user buy-in if you'll make it easier on their eyes like this. So, Alpesh, I've run through now the header, I've run through the quick launch, and I've run through the content part. What I'm going to do after this is I'm going to show some examples where it is completely changed. The whole color palette has changed, so we can see what that's going to look like.
Sure.
Okay, so let's put all this together. Here's the default SharePoint interface. I just took a screenshot and said, okay, if you just open SharePoint out of the box, what would it look like? And this is what we see when we open the box. So keep this in mind as we go to the first color. And all we've done is change the CSS here to do that. Now, when I'm doing this in front of an audience, I usually get a gasp on this because look how powerful that is compared to this. I think that's pretty incredible. There's a lot happening here that's done with colors. So you've got the black color there. The other thing that helps there that I like is the footer that was put in here. See that footer down at the bottom? That actually gives a bottom to the page, which is nice, which I think is lacking. It really is missing in the default SharePoint interface because if you don't have anything on your page, it just rolls off the whole bottom and your eye just kind of falls onto your keyboard. There's no place to stop. There's the one where we did the burgundy wine. There you go. Now we've got the slate. God, we've had a good response to this one, by the way. As you're looking at these colored ones, keep in mind that at the end of this session, I'm going to show you how you can get these for free as a site manager. We're going to give these to you. So just kind of choose the ones that you like, the color-wise, and say, no, I would love for my site to look like that in 60 seconds. So we'll look at that. Now, the other thing that we can do with this type of thing is we can create premium experiences. Now, Alpesh, if you would get on the mic here, I really want your reaction to this, Alpesh, when we're pulling through these, okay?
Yes, sure.
Okay. So here's the first premium experience. Go ahead. There's the first one. This is what we did with the default SharePoint interface.
Wow, that looks good.
Isn't it pretty amazing what you're seeing across the top there horizontally? That's your quick launch bar now. So it gives your content the ability to spread across the page better.
Wow.
And so now and your global navigation is on the right-hand side. Pretty cool, right?
It is very cool. It is very cool.
Okay. How about that?
I love this, the best one. And I believe this might be your personal favorite because that's what you had when we started off.
That's right. This is called I call this the Skyscraper. And what we can do is we can put this together and you can put a different background behind it and have wonderful effect for it.
Nice.
So what we found at SP TechCon when we rolled this out last week is that the darker ones like this, the initial impression is, holy smokes, these are great. But would you really want to sit behind one of these for all day and do work behind it? And I'd say no. I'd say these are more like kiosk interfaces. That if you're given, if you have a kiosk that you want to get set up or a touch screen or something, these are wonderful. How do you like this?
This is amazing. This is good as well. Definitely it's good. But nothing like the previous one, honestly.
Okay, so you like the Skyscraper?
Yes.
Then you are in the 90th percentile of the people that stopped at our booth. The Skyscraper is the one. And what we're doing, Alpesh, is we're actually going now. Audrey is working this week to change, and we're going to add new themes to the theme gallery that actually have light colored backgrounds. So you actually can work in front of this all day.
Amazing.
I'm very, very excited about this. When we pulled this up last week in front of 500 people, the room gasped. And so I knew that we had...
people do that over here. Unfortunately, we can't hear them. But obviously, we don't have 500, but yeah, I can understand what you mean by that.
Okay. So here's what I want to leave you with. I'm going to round this out in the next 2 or 3 minutes, and then you guys can get on with the rest of SPS India.
Yep.
There are 7,000 plus lines of CSS in SharePoint. you are absolutely more than welcome to actually dig in. The resources are there. You've got your browser developer tools. You've got Heather and Benjamin leading the way as far as hand-holding and getting you started with branding. Nothing but branding is going to be there. We're putting articles up every single day to help site managers. Everything that you saw today, Alpesh, can be done at the site manager level.
Amazing. Sure.
Isn't it? So what we have now is, here's my takeaway from you. I'd like you to go to Nothing But Branding when you get a chance, not today while you're at the sessions, but when you get a chance, go to nothingbutbranding.com. We have 4 or 5 of those color themes that I just showed you, and we're going to give those to you.
Sure. Thank you so
along
much.
Along with that, for SharePoint Saturday India, there's a little app. You download the app, and then you can store those themes in the app. It's called your Theme Manager, and it resides on your desktop. So you don't have to have site collection admin privileges. You don't have to have IT privileges. It's a little desktop app that holds your templates for you, and it pushes them up to your SharePoint site when you're ready to use them. So
Wow,
please,
amazing.
everyone is more than welcome to do that.
Sure.
The other thing that we've got is the people along the bottom of my picture here. That's my team at Nothing But Branding. I'm very proud of them. I think we've worked for the last 3 or 4 months, every single day trying to put this together. I hope you guys enjoy it. I hope if you're interested in branding, you'll come over and see us. And at that, I'll say, please have a good time at SharePoint Saturday India today. And I hope to see you live, Alpesh, when I get to come to India.
That'll be fantastic. Thank you, Mark. Thank you so much for presenting, for sharing the information, the knowledge, and also kindly giving away those templates for the attendees. So I will get to them. I certainly will do that. So thank you so much, Mark, and hopefully we should be talking around the sharing the Point India experience.